Welcome, everybody. This is Addison Williams. I have a very special guest with me on this episode of Prospects for Christ. This is actually a former teammate of mine from Northeastern State University. His name is Derek Shedden. Derek, thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Before we get started today, I want to quickly introduce our guest today. Derek Shedden is from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. He's currently 27 years old. Derek grew up in the church down the road from his house, and it's actually the same church that he attends today in Beulah Alliance Church, which is in West Edmonton, Canada. He actually attended two schools during his college baseball career: Oakenoggen College in Colona, British Columbia, Canada, for 1 year, and Northeastern State University, which is where I met him, in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, for 4 years. Derek graduated in the spring of 2018 with a degree in criminal justice. He then returned home to Canada and now currently works as a police officer with the Edmonton Police Service. So Derek, first of all, thank you for your service as a police officer. We can unpack that later. But we've got a lot of story to talk about. We've got a lot to talk about to you and with you. So thank you so much for being on today. I know that from the short time that I knew you, which I was an older classman whenever you came in to the Northeastern State baseball program. But I'd love to just unpack, first of all, your college career. Obviously, you started playing baseball at a young age 4. What was in your mind growing up that said, I want to play college baseball? Walk us through briefly your younger years into high school, thinking that you wanted to play ball at the next level.
Well, I mean, I always wanted to play at the next level. That was my dream. I know that once it finally happened, my mom kind of made a comment that when I got there, saying like, "Hey, well, you did exactly what you wanted to do. You got to go play college baseball in the States too." That was a big thing for me being from Canada. So I want to go play in the States. You know, that's where baseball's big. That's where I want to go. So, but I started playing rec league when I was 4, playing little t-ball in Edmonton here in the West End, and kind of grew up doing that. Moved up to some other ones until I found out that there was more competitive AA, AAA baseball teams I could try out for. Started doing that maybe when I was about 10 or 11, but I wasn't so good back then, so I wasn't always making those teams. And then to play on some lower AA teams until I was able to try out again for some AAA teams, and again didn't make them off the bat, but was able to join an academy in high school when I was about 15 years old, and started working really hard through there. Learned what a weight room was, and got some better coaching and training. And then I started making the AAA teams in high school. In Edmonton, there was only one at the time, so you could play on the AAA team in Edmonton, or you go down to the bottom level. We don't have as many teams as you do in America. We have only so many guys, so you got to kind of keep the competition good by only having a few teams. But then I was able to make Team Alberta, so I made the provincial team, provincial, state, same thing. So I did that, and then from there I got some looks and some invites from the Canadian universities, and as well as a few American ones. But the most feasible thing in my mind was to go to Oakenoggen College off the bat, and then from there I got to play in a summer league that got me an opportunity to go to Northeastern State, and of course that's where we met. So it's kind of the path I followed, but it was good. I was lucky, had a lot of good opportunities and helping hands along the way.
Absolutely. So obviously I was on your team. I know the positions that you played. So walk us through you getting recruited from Northeastern State. Talk about that shift, moving from Canada to, let's be honest, you moved to Oklahoma, which is in the Midwest type. So completely different atmosphere. Obviously you're a long way from home. So talk about that dynamic, moving literally out of your home country.
It was different. I mean, luckily Canada and America are more the same than they are different, especially where I came from. I know you say going down to the Midwest and things are a little bit more southern, a little more country style there, but Alberta is very much like that too here in Canada. So it wasn't as much of a shift as you might think. You know, here we got all the farming and the rodeo and that kind of stuff too. So it wasn't so much of a shift as far as culture. Certain things definitely for sure. Obviously, there's big differences between Canada and the States as well, but it was good getting recruited. You know, even going to a different province, leaving home was an experience. Obviously grew up with a good family and stayed at home until I was finished high school, 17, 18, and then moving to BC was something, British Columbia. But that getting that opportunity to go out in the States was a big decision for myself and my family, just to think about should we, shouldn't we. I had a really good thing going in Colona there. So it was kind of hard to make that decision, but ultimately we made it. It kind of happened through time at the head coach at the time. It was interesting. I was playing for the Edmonton Prospects in the summer, the first year after I finished Colona, and the head coach of NSU at the time was actually trying to recruit another guy on my team. And the head coach said, "Oh, if you're looking for a shortstop, well, I got a better one for you." And then he proposed my name instead of the kid that actually wanted to go to that school, and that ended up working out. So I feel a little bad for that other guy, but it was none of my doing. It was the coach. So got in touch with Travis Jansen, and it was kind of a blind leap of faith for him, because he recruited me strictly off the stats he was seeing in the Western Major Baseball League, where tons of actually MIAA guys go and play each summer. So he figured, you know, if my stats were like that up there, then he said he took a chance on me. I remember him saying that we had a few phone calls. He's like, "Oh, something just feels right. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to take a chance." So he offered me a scholarship of sorts, kind of mostly just waiving the international fees. And we kind of signed a deal, and it came down to Oklahoma, which I'd never heard a thing about before I signed a deal to go down there and had to start looking things up.
That's true. And I can hear Coach Jansen saying those exact words in his Jansenese. You know, it's one of those things. So that's awesome. I love your story there. Let's talk a little bit about what it takes to, obviously you put in the work because you wanted to play college baseball. Let's talk a little bit about what happened behind the scenes, because like I said, we can read stats. We can say Derek Shedden played college baseball. Obviously, those are the high level things, but let's take it down and just talk a little bit more about what athlete life actually looks like. So you're playing at a college, you move across the country. How are you in your mind? How are you looking to prove basically your worth as a baseball player at the collegiate level?
Yeah. So, I mean, behind the scenes and all that kind of stuff, I mean, there's a lot that goes into being a collegiate baseball player. As you know as well, you put in all that work to get there as well. And I think it's a culmination of a lot of good decisions, I think. I mean, most of the guys that get there, they're pretty dedicated, focused individuals that weren't cutting corners at practice. And, you know, they're doing the suicides properly. They're doing the sprints hard. They're focused on, you know, getting the right feel on their pitch or the right kind of swing. So I think those are ultimately the guys that kind of make it there. And anyone wanting to get to that level, it's the habits and the routines that you have to create in order to make it there. And obviously those are crucial for that, but then they extend into the rest of your life. So that's really, really important. And that's kind of the focus that you'd have to get to the collegiate level. I believe played with tons of guys who were talented, but weren't focused. And I think that mindset is huge in taking that next step. You know, 1% of high school guys get to go play college, and 1% of those guys get to go play pro. So it's kind of that mindset, I think, that separates everybody.
Absolutely. So for you, as you're going into your first season at Northeastern State, let's talk a little bit about life on the field. How are you entering into your mindset? What's your mindset like? Obviously, with baseball, you start in August, you go through December, you have a handful of fall games after you've been through all of this work in preparation for a 52 game spring season. So let's talk about baseball mindset for you specifically. How do you, even when the going gets tough, how do you transition and just keep your mindset where you want it to be?
Hey, sorry, Addison, you cut out there for me. I missed the last half of that question.
No worries. So I'll start over. When it comes to mindset, from the fall season for baseball in preparation for spring, how do you stay in the right mindset day in and day out?
Well, I think that's one of the hardest things to do. Playing baseball, playing lots of sports, but particularly mental games. I think it's hard to keep your mindset sharp and focused, and maybe in that good mindset that you want to be in when everything's firing on all cylinders and baseball seems easy. Those are the mindsets you want. But through a 52 game season, you said it's a marathon. There's going to be ups, downs, times where you're hot and getting multi-hit games, or going deep into games if you're on the mound, and then there's going to be times where you're feeling like you can't hit the ball if your life depended on it and you can't throw strikes. So but trying to keep that good mentality and positivity, good self-talk, I think that's really important. I was never per se the best at that, especially at a young age. I think I do it better now playing than I used to, but it's part of learning, part of growing. When you get into college, you're still pretty young, so it's good skills to develop. And I mean, give yourself some grace if you don't have them when you're 18, I suppose. But yeah, it's a muscle, right? You got to work that mindset, and it gets stronger in time as you go. So trying to be positive, and because that negative self-talk kills. I did that a lot, and that's, I think, what hurt me most of all. But yeah, definitely, you got to be positive, and again, good thing for life. Sports and life are very interconnected.
Absolutely. So whenever we talk about self-talk, negative self-talk, do you have a practical example of a situation that you went through where you kind of battled that? Just that, I wouldn't call it negativity, but just bad self-talk where, you kind of hit that rut. Talk through some of the bad times that you might have experienced as a player.
Oh yeah, those are plentiful. I have a couple like good examples. I mean, like, I'm not gonna sit here and pull the wool over anybody's eyes and saying that I had the most excellent college career of all time. I really didn't. Most part a bench warmer. I played niche roles. I was fast. I could run. I was a pretty decent defender, but as a whole, I wasn't that complete package. And I think I struggled a lot with that. Coming from Canada, where I was what I would say a big fish in a small pond, with not many guys playing the sport up here, limited talent level in comparison as a whole. There's a lot of talented players up here, but we only have 34 million people up here as opposed to your 360 million. So just less people. But I think coming from Canada, where I was a big fish in a small pond and everything was kind of easier, and I had a lot of success early on, and then coming to the US where the level went up quite a bit, and I realized I wasn't as good as I thought I was, and I was no longer the stud on that team, and I had to try and reduce myself to a role playing guy. I didn't do that very well, and that's for reasons, when we talk about life, you got pride, you got some things like that really prevent you from letting go of those things. I could have been a little better and just accepted my role and tried to help the team better than I did. But it's hard to do that, right? And that's when the negative self-talk comes in, and maybe you're lying to yourself, and you're telling yourself, oh, you should be doing better. You're better than this, and you're failing. You're disappointing everyone back home. You're disappointing your parents, your family. Those kind of like really negative self-talk, and that happened to me a lot when I was in Oklahoma there. And that's more of like a general thing. But there's specific ones too, where I remember when I was in Edmonton playing for the Prospects, it turned out to be the best play of my life, but what preceded it was bad. Because I was playing left field. We're in the finals of the Western Major League Baseball League Championship, playing against the Swift Current 57s. But late inning, we're about to win, go up 2-1 in the best of 5 series, and easy can of corn fly ball to me in left field, and I'm kind of moseying over the line, and it hits off the heel of my glove and drops down, and creates a big scoring opportunity for them, and to the point where they're about to tie or win the game, and it's a little nerve-wracking. But I hadn't dropped a ball all year. We played 60 some games, hadn't dropped a single ball, and then happens, of course, in the finals. But I remember the negative self-talk really got going there. I wanted to I blamed the umpire because I thought I was in foul territory. I blamed my glove because I told myself that you're terrible. You should have caught that. How can you be so dumb? And but that was actually a moment where the self-talk came, the positive stuff came, and I took a deep breath and took a few deep breaths and told myself I was going to get a chance, and literally prayed. I was like, God, give me another chance, redeem myself. And said, I'm good. You'll get the next one. You can still help the team win this game. And lo and behold, with 2 outs and 1-run game, I think tying and winning run on 3rd and 2nd, there was a sharp sinking line drive towards the line, and I ran and made the best diving catch of my life to win the game. And that was something good. But again, without that positive self-talk, I think if I would have just kept beating myself up, I would have been a little nervous, apprehensive, unconfident. I don't think I make that play if I don't switch the mindset there and start talking positively.
Yeah, so that's awesome. Those are 2 fantastic examples. I appreciate you sharing that. Let's kind of take a step back, if we can, for just a moment, and just talk through how you're able to, in a moment, focus on the next play. Because I feel like a lot of people in the stands, they don't necessarily realize the pressure we put under ourselves. And so, especially if we boot a ball, make an error, on the mound, we hit a guy. Let's talk about the negative self-talk, and in a split second decide, let's get the next one. How do you do that?
Again, you got to play a little bit. You can't have a lot of pride. You can't have a lot of ego. You got to just shake it off. You're human. You make mistakes. I know that better than anyone. I think, like I said, when I was in high school, I think I led the province in errors my first 2 years as a shortstop, and then started getting better mentality, and I made less next year and made Team Alberta. So it's about kind of getting that shift in mindset. But it is hard. As athletes, we put ourselves through immense pressure, far more pressure than I reasonably believe we should, especially looking back. Hindsight's 2020. But lots and lots of pressure. So, and in the stands, you said people don't understand. They don't know all the hours that we put into taking ground balls or doing bullpens or taking hacks in the cage. It's just lots and lots of time. And when you fail after doing all that stuff, it's reasonable to be a little upset with yourself when you think, well, I practiced for hours and hours and hours. Why did I screw up? But you're human, and that's kind of what we do, right? So accepting that you're human, shake it off, laugh about it. It's a game. I think that was big for me. Just not take it so seriously. And those who played with me or know me know I'm actually a pretty serious guy. So for me to say, don't take it so seriously is a little almost against my nature. But it's true. And you got to take a step back and yeah, that positive self-talk, because when it's not a big deal and when it's not your identity and your life doesn't depend on it, you realize, you're not in a life or death situation, and you're not you're playing a game. It's supposed to be fun, right? I think that makes it easier to accept mistakes and move on to the next one, because every single guy in that field's made mistakes, and every single guy in that field's going to make more mistakes. So we tend to be inward focused, and we make an error, we think about it for the next 5 innings when everyone else forgot about it 5 minutes after it happened. So can't take yourself so seriously. You're not that important. That's a good little self-check.
Absolutely. You bring up a couple of really good points, Derek. Let's talk about identity. Let's talk about how you're able to separate yourself from what happens on the field. So where does your identity come from?
Well, that's a big thing. And, as obviously as Christians, I think that's a huge topic. And, you say, how were you able to separate your identity? I think when I played, I wasn't. And again, that's, I think, where a lot of my collegiate problems came from. Given the chance, I would love to go back and just restart the collegiate experience again, but not how it works. But your identity, I think that's huge, and knowing what you stand for, and that's huge in your whole life, because there's always going to be something that you're doing, people that you're around, idols that you can create in your life, and that's dangerous. Is a part of just your future and how you view yourself and your self-esteem and your confidence and everything else. If it's coming from a sport or a job or a friend or a spouse or who knows what, it's going to disappoint you, because those things are human, and they're going to disappoint, because that's what they're made to do. But as Christians, we're supposed to put our identity in Christ and kind of focus on that is what's truly important. And I think that it's a hard thing to do. To say otherwise is silly. It's not easy to put your identity in Christ, but he made us and he knows what we need. So if you're able to do that, I think that you're going to find that peace that transcends all understanding. That's super, super important in your life, and reduces that anxiety, reduces that stress about everything else. So identity is huge, and where you put it is something that needs to be focused on greatly. And it's not easy, but it's important.
Absolutely. So we not only met on the baseball field, obviously, with you coming in as a freshman and I was exiting as a senior pretty much, but we had 1 year together. And I'd love to just take a moment and say we also had experiences together with FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I'd love for you to share that journey a little bit, because a moment ago you talked about community, and you obviously moved from Canada to Northeastern Oklahoma. So why don't you open up and just share what types of community were you looking for whenever you moved into a new place for the first time, coming from Canada to Northeastern State? Where was your journey? How did you get connected and find community?
Yeah, it's important. Community is huge, because you need those positive influences, and you become who you're around. So I know in Edmonton, I had a great community. My family's phenomenal. I had good friends, great church, felt really connected, almost in a bubble in a sense. I had no idea about the real world or the scary things that come from it, but I did it well. When I went to Colona, I left home and I got connected with a really good church there off the bat, young adults group. So that was good. So I did it good in Colona. But when I moved to Oklahoma, I didn't do it quite as well. But Fellowship of Christian Athletes was a godsend and a savior in a lot of the senses for my 4 years down there, because it was actually Nate Holman, as we talked about before, that invited me to go to FCA first. We were just teammates. I barely knew the guy, but he just, hey, you want to go to FCA? And I was like, yeah, sure. So we went, and I pretty much went every Thursday since. Every time I'd go, and it was good. Obviously, Coach Varner, he's the man. So really glad to know him. He set all that kind of stuff up for us, and he was incredibly gracious and generous to a bunch of college kids. But having that community, right, with Coach Varner at the helm there, with all the people around that are of similar faith, mindset, values, character, it's really important, especially when you're at a university. You're thrown out into that secular kind of world, and you gotta make sure you keep yourself grounded in faith. And it's easy when you're in college and you're crazy busy to ignore the church aspect. No, well, too tired to go to church on Sunday, I gotta study, it's my one day off, things like that. You want to really dig into those relationships, because without that community and without those people kind of keeping you accountable, and that constant continuation of learning about Christ and things like that, it's super important. And without it, I think it's really easy to fall by the wayside or be caught up in the other situations and temptations and anything else that university life throws at you, especially when you're young.
Absolutely. So let's cut the blinders off and talk about the reality that we face, the temptations, whether or not we like it or not. Girls, alcohol, drugs. I'm not saying that you actually experienced all of those in certain capacities, but as athletes, and anyone in general has struggles with those things in specific ways. But obviously, as an athlete, we have to uphold X amount of standards, because we're not only going to classes, we're also having to maintain good grades to play on this team. Derek, how do you find balance in that? How do you not just give in to that temptation? I mean, what's your rock? Obviously, you do have a faith, but like more practically, how can you encourage a new freshman going into this environment, looking for community, fighting who they are, not only in Christ, but just as a person, as an 18-year-old? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I would say be careful. If we're cutting the blinders off, as you said, those temptations are real, and they're very prevalent. And yeah, I can't say that I wasn't caught up in some of that stuff. I wish I was a little better in university, but it's a matter of the fact that I think that I was, it's slow. It's a culmination of things. You don't come out of high school as a good Christian kid sheltered in the world in a little bubble and start, going to parties and doing drugs and alcohol the next day. That's not how it works. But it will be the little by little culmination over time of things that you make compromises that you shouldn't make. You say things are okay that aren't okay just once, and then it's twice, and then soon enough, I think it actually might have been Coach Varner that said you make compromise after compromise until you compromise yourself into a situation you never thought you'd be in, right? Not sure if that was Coach Varner, but I think it was. And it's true. He's not lying. There's wisdom in that. You might think that you'd never find yourself in their situation, and then 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road, there you are. Different as a senior than you were as a freshman. So, and that's why I'm saying, just be careful and make sure you have that good community that grounds you, because you might make decisions and might make mistakes that seem temporary, or they're permanent in the long run. I know lots of people who got themselves in even more trouble than I did. And, they're paying for that still to this day. It's university's it's a small 4 years of your life, and it seems like maybe the biggest deal, but life goes on. University ends and you graduate, and you're not a part of that community anymore, and they move on as if you were never there and didn't exist. And you got to go live your life, right? And you got to make sure that your heart's in the right place, and your mind hasn't been poisoned and things like that. And not to make it sound all scary and say your mind's poisoned or things, but it's just things you got to be careful with. There's tons of temptations, as you said, with girls or guys if you're a lady, and drugs and alcohol. It's prevalent stuff, and it's something you got to guard your heart about, as Christ tells us to do. Because if not, yeah, you might find yourself in a little bit of a sticky situation. So, and I pray that that's not the case. But my advice to a freshman coming in, not knowing what to experience, is that, hey, if you grew up in a good community with good people, good influences, like, find those people and cling to them, right? Because that all that other stuff's gonna be there 100%. And not saying to ignore people and not enjoy college and go hide in your room the whole time, but just be self-aware, be aware of what you're thinking about, what your heart's dwelling on, and the direction that you're going in your life, because your life continues a long while after university if you're lucky. And the habits and character and routines that you create for yourself in university into adulthood, where they really matter, because there's real consequences and real things that happen with people. So that would be my recommendation, just to be careful, but enjoy it, because university is still the best.
Absolutely. There are many times where I wish I could be ending baseball practice right now about 5:45 Texas time, but that's not the reality. You mentioned a lot of good points, Derek. One of the things that I do want to call out, you've said it over and over, which in a positive way, I don't want to discount that, but this idea of identity. And I feel like a lot of people, myself included, I am not sharing my testimony today, that's for another time, but one of the biggest things that I have fought, and you have mentioned a lot, is identity. And it's this notion that, number one, we go to college to play sport. Some people make it 4 years, some people make it 5 if they're a redshirt freshman. Some people don't make it at all. And it's no fault or anything. It's just that person's journey. But the one thing that always resounds is this idea of identity. And so before we talk through a little bit more about your faith, I would just like to pause and just say, you mentioned earlier on the show that you would do a lot of things differently. I'm just curious as to your personal identity journey, just in your college experience. You're raised in the church, you may move to a new place. There are some things that you're like, man, I wish I could do this differently. But how does identity play into your experience?
Well, like I said, I think I do a lot of things differently because my identity was misplaced during the time. I think it's easy to get your identity caught up in whatever you're doing at this particular moment. And since I said I played baseball since I was 4, relatively successful in baseball since I was 4. It was known amongst my friends and my family as like, oh, he's the baseball guy. He's really good at baseball. And it built up in my mind that, well, I am the baseball guy. Like, baseball is my identity. I'm going to the MLB, and that's just going to be my life. Like, I'm just going to play baseball until I die. And I think that more collegiate athletes have that mentality than they're probably willing to admit. Because I saw a lot of my friends that finished collegiate baseball at NSU and otherwise, I had friends all over that when they graduated, they had no clue what they were going to do with their lives, because baseball was their identity. And like I said, when you graduate and you get given your diploma, unless you're one of the lucky few that gets to go play pro ball, you're done, right? And the sport doesn't need you. The university doesn't need you. It's going to move on without you, just as it always did. And if your identity's rooted in that, you're going to be in trouble. So I think it's important to realize, where identity comes from. But that was me in a sense. My whole 4 years, I think, of at NSU was a battle of uprooting my very firmly rooted identity in baseball and preparing for the next stage in life. And I'm happy I did that. A lot of long talks with my parents, my grandparents, my mentors, kind of people I looked up to for wisdom about, the way my college experience was going baseball wise, because it wasn't great. It wasn't really what I thought it was going to be. And thank God for that, honestly, because it's been a blessing in disguise in the long run. But I think about all that time, and it's easier to be like, oh, if I had the mentality I had now, I think I would enjoy my baseball career a lot more, because I was stressed out. It's the game I played my whole life. I loved it. I do firmly believe I was good at it, but I wasn't allowing myself to be good at it while I was there, because my mentality was so rotten, and I was so fixated on, well, this is who I am. I am a successful baseball player. But when I would play, I would get super nervous, anxious. I was scared of my coaches. I was scared of disappointing people. I was scared of, how did I look externally to everyone else? Does everyone else think I'm a good baseball player? Or, and that stuff kills you, right? Because then you're not focusing on the fact that, I'm achieving my dream. I'm getting to play college baseball. This is always what I wanted. And I spent more time focusing on what the coaches thought of me or whether or not I was playing well than just living my life and enjoying the blessing that was given to me and just having fun. Like I said, I wish I was going for batting practice right now. And fortunately, I still get to go to batting practice sometimes with my team I play for here, but I enjoy it now more because I'm having fun. There's no expectation. My identity is not that I played for the Edmonton Cubs. My identity is not that I'm a police officer, right? Those things are not. I could just as easily have rooted my identity from, well, I'm a baseball player to now I'm a cop, right? I could have done that, but I would have been back in the same situation as before. That's a super dangerous thing to base your identity in, again, because it's empty. It has an end date, and it's not going to fulfill you like Christ says he can and does. So it's really important, I think, to be extremely introspective and confirm where your identity lies if you are a college athlete currently. And if you believe that it's in the wrong place, that's something to address, because mine certainly was. And it took like those 4 years pretty much to slowly uproot it until I felt like I was able to walk away from the sport when I graduated as a senior. But I wish I could have done it earlier and just enjoyed every aspect of those 4 years when I was there, whether or not I was playing, whether or not I was a bench warmer, or whether or not I was an All-American. To me, I hope it wouldn't have mattered, and I could just enjoy the experience and thank God every day that he's allowing me to live a dream out.
Thanks for sharing that, Derek. One of the things that I'd love to ask you would be this. What was your God moment? What was the moment where you said, my identity isn't in baseball, it's actually in God? And how did that shape who you are now and your perspective now? Because now it's fantastic. You're saying all the right things, you're giving this wonderful advice, but what was your God moment that said, I hung up the cleats for the last time, my identity, I got wrapped up in this thing. Now, retrospective, I can see that, but where did the line cross for you?
I legitimately think, and it's going to sound kind of cliche, but I legitimately think it was in the last game I played in SU, when my parents actually came down from Canada. My dad had been down a couple of times. We drove down usually together because we make that drive, so I have a car down there. But my mom came, so my mom and dad were there for seniors weekend. Super cool. So I guess it wasn't technically the last weekend because we still had playoffs, so those would have been the last games. But the last game at home in front of my parents, where again I realized, looking back now, I was just like, wow, my identity really was in a baseball player and trying to be successful in that. Because I didn't play much, but I think I got a couple opportunities from some at bats while they were there. It killed me to have my parents, fly all the way to Oklahoma to watch their son sit on the bench and see a bunch of boys that they don't know go out there and have some fun. But I think Coach Hendrick had some pity on me and gave me a couple at bats there in the last couple of games, and in my own head, I'm like, oh, it'd be awesome if I could just hit like a home run or something in front of my parents. Even looking back now, it's unrealistic. I was not a power hitter. Why would I be hitting a home run? It's just unreasonable. But in my striving for a successful identity in the sport and a little cherry on top to my baseball career, hoping to hit a home run, I think I struck out my last ever at bat. So that was another shot to the ego and another pride thing I had to deal with. But strike out, and I'm all upset, and I put my hat and glove on and run out to left field to play the last inning, and had like a legitimate, it almost felt like a cry out to God, why did my 4 years at NSU go this way? It just seemed like you brought me away from a really good thing in Canada where I was having a ton of fun and success, and down to Oklahoma where my baseball career in a nutshell was a train wreck. So it was kind of a very frustrated, genuine cry out. And I remember just having something put on my heart that was the purpose, to teach me, the words put on my heart were teach how to fight. Right. The whole idea of being able to fight and fight through things is a big theme for me in my faith. And there was a lot of fight, not physically. I wasn't, getting in fist fights, but emotionally and mentally learning how to fight, fighting through the identity fight was a big one, trying to learn how to uproot that, fighting through anxiety and stress and things that I really never had experienced before that were coming at me big time there. Because up until that point in my life, I never had to fight. I never, everything was easy for me. I had a good family, good childhood, church, school, high school baseball, first year collegiate, and then get to NSU and everything became really difficult. And I wasn't doing well. And, stresses and other anxieties and pressures started mounting. And I had to learn how to fight a little bit. And I think that's, in my position now, I think that's a really good thing to have experienced all that, because I don't think I'd be a very effective police officer without the ability to do a lot of those things. But yeah, in that genuine cry out of why did you bring me down here? What on earth was the reason to come all the way to Oklahoma for 4 years for baseball to be, not a great experience, or not the experience that I had imagined in my own head. I suppose that's a better, not that it wasn't a good experience. It was amazing, but didn't pan out how I thought it would, and, relationships with coaches that were not always the best at times, teammates that weren't always the best at times, getting involved in things, like I said, compromising yourself into situations that you didn't think you'd be in because you're trying to numb that pain or stress or anxiety in stupid ways. That was kind of the cry out. There's a culmination of that. I was probably almost in tears sitting there left field hiding behind my Oakleys. But it was genuine, genuine cry out. And I felt like I got an answer of learning how to fight and fight out of those things. And, in that same sense, you're fighting, but you're relying on God. Up until that point, I felt like I was doing everything on my own. I didn't need help. I was good at most things. But, I think God decided to really humble me with something that I couldn't handle on my own. So it was important. Really good lesson to learn. And, I wish I had those opportunities to know those things and be better in that time. I think it'd be a fun college experience if I did it again. But, life's long. Like I said, it's just 4 years. I got hopefully a lot of years ahead of me and can hopefully take that mentality into future years in the positions I'm in now.
Absolutely. So you had the revelation. Obviously, I know the exact feeling that you went through of crying behind your Oakleys or having the sensitive side come out behind your Oakleys. It's one thing that we have the fortunate gift of, and that's glasses to cover up what our face and eyes are showing. Totally can relate to that. So obviously you're out of college now. You've been out for a while and you're a police officer, but let's talk a little bit about you practically living out your faith now. I mean, especially in your line of work, we both majored in criminal justice, and I am not a police officer, but you are. And obviously we can talk about difference of paths right now. How do you keep your identity rooted in Christ in your career right now and in your family life, whatever that might look like?
Yeah, it's been good to be back home and connect with my family, who are all, really strong faith. They're good influences and good pillars for me to lean on. But it's hard to live out your faith as a police officer. That's often a battle that I've often talked about with my family and things like that. But you gotta, in my mind, you have to keep your friends outside of policing. That was huge. I've been involved with a young adults group out of Beulah with a couple of my siblings, and then a bunch of other friends. So try and make that as much as I can. It's tough with shift work, but that's huge. Go to Sunday service as much as I can. Reading tons of books. That's been really big for my faith. The Bible's obviously the best one, but there's phenomenal books outside of that can really give you practical life experiences and lessons, like Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. That's one I'd recommend to anyone watching this. Screw Tape Letters. I love C.S. Lewis. That's a good one. Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. That's a really good book as well to look into, especially for college students, college athletes in particular, who are incredibly busy individuals. That's a book I wish I had back then. Problem of God, things like that. There's a lot of really good books that can help deepen your understanding of Christianity and faith and Jesus. It's really good. So that's kind of, I try and grow my faith. It can be, you're put in tricky situations as a police officer often, where sometimes it's great and it's easy and you get to go bless somebody who was stealing food by buying them some food, right? That's instead of laying the hammer down on them or arresting them. Maybe there's a better, more compassionate option here. Other times there's not a compassionate option and you need to be the enforcement, and that's okay too. I don't think that God calls us to be weak. I think that Christians are very strong and tenacious, and there's a time and a place for those things. So a lot of different ways to live out your faith in this career, and it's been phenomenal so far in the couple of years I've been doing it. But yeah, you see everything. You see the really good, and you also see the worst of society. So it can be hard to see the senseless violence and the killing and the pain and the homelessness, drug addiction, and I think at least we get a little desensitized to that. But when I can take a step back and look at it from a human perspective, it's pretty sad. But I know that with my faith that, Jesus gives a meaning to all. And I know that it's not just senseless, and there'll be a time when things are made right. But right now we're kind of just dealing with that fallen nature of mankind. And if I can, be a little bit of light in some people's lives, then that's good. Or if I can be the enforcement and help somebody out in a different way, then that's good too. So it's been good. I'm not perfect still. It's easy to be on a podcast and say the right things, but nobody's perfect. You can't be perfect all the time. But I think what's important is where your heart is and the things you're striving towards and the direction you're looking. So
that's fantastic. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about Christianity is that Christians are perfect. And then also the reality that Christians are also soft. They can't have a competitive side because that goes against who Jesus is. But the reality is we are called to be the light. Like you said, we are called to be confident and the fruits of the Spirit, to where we're human. The only perfect human that walked this earth was Jesus. And I think a lot of people get the misconception that Christians are out in this bubble of holier than thou. And while I'm not going to beat around the bush and say that there aren't those kinds of people. I think one of the misconceptions about Christian athletes is that, number one, we have it all together, or B, we are the outsiders in a sense. And I'm sure that you could speak to that as well.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, huge misconceptions that Christians are perfect. I mean, I think the true thing about Christianity is that none of us are perfect. And there only, as you said, was one that was. So already to say, oh, Christians think they're perfect, well, that's off base, unless you are talking about as, you might call them the country club Christians that think they are all that and better than everybody. And yeah, like I said, that exists. But, to humble ourselves, I think, is to know that, yeah, we are sinful and fallen, but God's given us grace that we don't deserve. So that's important. But yeah, to say that Christian athletes are weak or, uncompetitive or soft, I think that's wrong. And I think if you're a Christian, you think that you need to be that way, I think that's the incorrect way of looking at it. You're called to be who God made you, and God made you to be confident and tenacious. And I think that you should be a fierce competitor. If God made you a competitor and he put that spirit in you, and you're going against that, then you're not really living out a gift that God's provided to you. So I'm a fiercely competitive person, and I struggle with that too, because in a sense, I was often told that my competitiveness was a bad thing, and that you don't always need to win, you don't always need to be competitive. And I think unfortunately, I started to believe that when you hear it enough. And I don't believe that anymore. I'm still a competitive person. I still strive very aggressively for self-improvement, good habits within balance, because like we talked about balance and identity, like it's very important that you do it in balance and everything. But, I don't deny my competitive nature. I'm fiercely competitive. I want to win at everything I do. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. If that's the way God made me, that's all right. And that's who I am. And I think that's who Christian athletes should be. If you're an athlete at this level, I'm assuming you're competitive. That's fine. Use that to your advantage. Be competitive. Go want to win. There's nothing wrong with that. I think, yeah, that's something God blessed you with, and go use that ability, use that trait.
So to bring it back into full circle, I want to break this last part up into 2 bits. Let's talk about your best advice for somebody that is listening to this podcast and they say, I want to play a collegiate sport. I feel like that's going back to the identity, it's like, I feel like that's who I am. I feel like I should play college sports, whatever that sport might be. And that might be true, but that person may not have a faith. So practically, what are you telling a high school senior that has the potential to go play a college sport? What advice are you giving that person?
Like, I would say that, there's a quote that my dad likes to use. He says, life's what happens on your way to something else. And you can interpret that how you like, but for me, it's, life's long. It's a journey. There's going to be a lot of things that you're interested in and you want to do. And I think that what's most important is to align yourself properly with the goals that you have. But don't make them your identity, as we kind of talked about. Like that's a dangerous thing. You're going to want to go on that path of just, I'm going to do this. I'm going to orient myself towards it. I currently have goals within my own career and otherwise that, this is what I want to do. This is who I want to be. So I'm going to orient myself to move myself, 1% every day towards those goals. And if that works out for me, then that's great. And if it doesn't, it's fine, because like I said, my identity is where it should be. My heart feels it's in the right place. And that's important for me. If my heart or my mind feels off about something, if I start getting some anxiety or some unnecessary stress, I got to kind of take a step back and figure out where my heart is, where my mind is. But yeah, if you want to play college baseball or you want to play college basketball, any college sport that you want to play, if that's something that you want to do, I say absolutely go for it. It's a great dream. It's going to take a lot of determination and focus and anything else, but the habits and routines that it's going to required to get you to that level are things that are going to help you for the rest of your life. Being fit, being good in school, good communicator, being a good teammate, all those things are huge, and those are the things you need to focus on. So make yourself the best version of yourself. Really look within, find the inadequacies, correct them. It's hard. You got to be vulnerable with yourself, but if you want to be a good college athlete, you want to be a good person, I think that's important. Faith or no faith, I suppose, if we're talking like that, and that's something you want to go do, then that's huge. Yeah, it's a good goal. It's great to have goals. You need goals, or else you become a little bit lost. So if that's the goal, it's an honorable one at that. So shoot for it, and I hope you make it.
Absolutely. And then closing it out, what do you have to the college senior that made it, and then perhaps they are fighting that identity crisis that we talked about? They've hung up their cleats, or they're listening to this podcast and their last game is near, whatever near means. What do you say to that person?
I would say that there's a lot of life, and there's a lot of good in life. If you're a college athlete, I'm assuming that you've dedicated most all your time in life to this particular sport and event for the last decade, more than likely. And I think that the really cool thing about graduating is that you get to do something else. Baseball is something I still love to do. I took a year off of it after I graduated because, again, I was struggling with everything that baseball accompanied, and it was a little bit ruined for me. But once I was able to get my mind a little bit straight, I went back to it. It's still fun, but I think the cool thing, is that I get to do other things now. There's a ton of other sports I'm interested in, play for fun. There's instruments that I've started to try and pick up and learn how to play, just because you have that time. You're going to find you've got a lot more time on your hands. And I think that it's important to fill that time with productive things. So if I was a college to the next level, I'm not going to the big show. That's all right. Not many people do. But it doesn't mean you can't have a really, really good thing going for the next little bit. So find some things that you're interested in. If you're leaving home, if you're leaving somewhere, you're going somewhere else, going back home, connect yourself with that community, as we're talking about. That's really important. But yeah, take all that time. You're a dedicated college athlete right now. You got good routines, good habits. Don't lose them. Don't work a full-time job and come home and watch Netflix for 6 hours and go to bed and repeat. Life has a lot to offer. So I would say, just my personal opinion, take it or leave it. But there's a lot of really cool things out there, and a lot of stuff to learn about, accomplish, and do. So that's my advice to the seniors. College is fun, but it's temporary. You got the rest of your life to do some incredible things.
I love that. So tell us a little bit about your baseball career now. I mean, everybody, I know that I'm thinking through, what is Derek Shedden doing now? Tell us a little bit more about this baseball team.
Yeah, it's great. So it's really funny, actually, because that college or high school academy I was with, we had a bunch of guys, kind of a little bit of a talented year. There was a couple of years in a row where there was some really good baseball talent. A lot of us got college scholarships to America and a lot of other places. And, we all graduated. None of us went to the big leagues. I think one or two of them got drafted, played a year, and now they're back here with us, just like everybody else. Now we're playing still competitively. We're on the Edmonton Cubs, which is the men's AAA league for Alberta and all of Canada. So we play against the other kind of local teams here, but still competitively. And you have a provincial or state championship at the end of the summer, and with our little talented group of guys who are all really good dudes and we get along well. We've won provincials the last 2 years in a row, minus the COVID year when there was no provincials. And since we won provincials last year, we get to go to Canadian Nationals this summer. So we're going to go all the way up to the east coast of Canada and play in Nationals representing Alberta. So it's really cool. I'm grateful to still be playing and be healthy enough to do that. And it's a blast just getting to play with a bunch of guys I went to high school with now that we're all older, but yeah, it's really fun. So that's what I'm doing every summer. And we're already practicing kind of indoors. There's still a lot of snow here in Canada, so soon we'll be outside on the field and getting ready for hopefully a three-peat with provincials and hopefully a good showing at nationals.
Well, I will definitely be rooting for you from the US. Last thing before we go, one of the things that you've mentioned is just how important your faith is. I think for a lot of people, there's this uncertainty of how do I live my faith out and how do I interact with it? How do you interact with people on a day-to-day basis and still know Jesus is my guy? I have a faith, I have a strong faith, and this is what I do. Close it out with just your call to action for people that have a faith and they're trying to look for ways to utilize it. For you specifically, you're still on a team and you still get to love that team environment and be a part of that. But the solo person, what are you telling that person?
It's a good question. I don't want to screw up the answer here, so I have to think about it. But there's a lot of ways you can live out your faith. It doesn't just have to be one way. Like I said, I'm on a team. I'm on dealing with people solo all the time, and I think that God and Jesus has called us just to love one another, and I think that love is important. Love's what makes it all worth it. Faith, hope, and love, but the most important one is love. So I think when you're loving people and when you're trying to genuinely be good, kind, compassionate, loving to others, people that deserve it from you, maybe don't deserve it from you, I think that that's a good place to start. And from there, we'll see where it takes you. But love's important. Got to be compassionate and kind to people. I know I get that all the time as a cop, and some people are easy to love and some people are pretty dang hard, but it's important to try and do it anyway. So
absolutely,
because God loves us and we don't deserve it necessarily all the time either. So.
Absolutely. Well, Derek, I certainly appreciate you being on the show today. You've said so many great things. Do you have any closing remarks for us? Anything at all you'd like to share?
No, just thanks for having me. I think it's really great what you're doing here, and I certainly wish that when I was going through my collegiate experience that somebody maybe a little older that had been through it already, I could listen to some of the things they had to say. That would have been really good for me. I'm not probably less than the average person, but I think it would have been good to hear from those who have been there and done that, but still understand, so I appreciate you doing this, and I think that you're doing a good thing, and I hope that it's very beneficial to everybody that gets to watch these podcasts as they start coming out.
Well, Derek, I certainly couldn't do it without you and the rest of the people that I'm going to be able to bring on the show. I think we all have different phases of life where we are uncertain about a lot of things. And one of the things that I've come to realize is that people aren't necessarily talking about it. And quite honestly, if I hadn't have reached out to you, I would have never known who the real Derek Shedden is, because like I mentioned, I was only able to know you for a very short amount of time because after I graduated, I left. And it goes back to what you said earlier on the podcast. It's this idea that everybody's going to move on. And the one thing that will always remain is somebody's testimony and somebody's story and the reality of who they actually are. That's the one thing that remains constant wherever you are. So I very much appreciate your willingness to come on. Like I said, you've said so many great things. impactful. I'm certainly encouraged. So thank you, Derek, so much. If there's anything at all that you'd like to say in the future, you know where to find me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. It was really fun.